right, so now we're going to focus solely on method 2. And so in method 2, you need to have a column of lower class boundaries. So the lower class boundaries are the minimum value for each class or each bin for the entire histogram, and then you need the midpoints. Now that is really super easy to calculate with Microsoft Excel, and so that's what I'm going to show you what to do. Now what we're looking at up here, is everything complete. So we've created a histogram with 16 classes. Microsoft Excel calls a class a bin. So 16 bins, which means 16 bars. And each class has a width of 27 here. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the same data, but we're going to create a histogram that instead of has 16 classes or 16 bins, it's going to have 9 classes and a width of 48. So let me show you how to set that up. So earlier I talked about it would be good to have 0 as a vertical height, given the context of the data that we have. So the starting point, the lower class boundary for the first class is actually going to be 0. So we can just type 0 here in this cell. Now, if you're not familiar with Microsoft Excel, we can actually program formulas into each of these cells. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually use some of this formula programming in Microsoft Excel to make our lives much easier. And so I'll show you some tricks on how to do this. So the first class is going to have a width of 48. Actually, every class has a width of 48. So in this cell, we need to do 0 plus 48. And so you say, well, why can't we just put 48 in there? Well, we can, but then we're going to have to manually calculate the rest, okay, which takes a little bit more time. So instead of calculating 48, you'll see that as I typed 48, if you look up here at the formula bar, here we've got 48 in the formula bar. But this is where we can actually type in a formula. So with this cell selected, you begin by typing in a formula by putting an equal sign. So whenever you type an equal sign, Microsoft Excel understands that you intend to include a formula now. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take the value in the cell above. So we're just going to click this cell, and you see it puts U27. So U27 is like a cross-reference. So that means column U, which is this column, and then the 27th row, which is here. So if you go to U27, that is this cell. So we're going to take this cell and add the width to it. So here we're going to put plus, and then we're going to click here for the width. And so you'll notice in the formula, the first part of the formula, U27, is in blue, and the second part of the formula of the sum is in red. And you'll see that it's color-coded these cells blue and red to kind of coincide with those cells being referenced here in blue and red. And at this point, this is all we need. So we could just click this check mark, and it's going to do 0 plus 48 and calculate 48. Now, one more thing so at this point, what we could do is just take this little handle. So that's this dot that's in the lower right-hand corner, and drag this down. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that formula and copy it all the way down. But you can see it's giving us an error. All right, so that didn't work. And the reason why it didn't work, let me show you how to make it work, first of all. So we want to continually use this value of 48. And so to kind of force Excel to only use that cell we come up here to U25, which was in red, and just put a $sign in front of the U and a $sign in front of the 25. And so now when we drag down, it shouldn't give us an error. So it worked. Okay, so first of all, it didn't give us an error. But if we look at the next formula, so as I click down here at the next formula, look at what changes up here. So it says U27 plus U25. And if I go to the next cell down, it now says U28 plus U25. So this cell is the sum of the cell above it plus that one. And if I go to the next one, it now says U29 plus U25. So this cell is the sum of the cell above it plus this one. So as we dragged down and Microsoft Excel auto-completed the formulas for all of these cells, the reference to the cell above changed, but the reference to the number 48 that we wanted to add to it didn't change. So if you put these little $signs in front of the column and in front of the row, it keeps using that cell over and over and over again without changing the reference here, okay? If that's a little confusing, it'll start to make sense the more you use it, okay, as to how that works. But that's a trick you can use to do something like this. So we'll just kind of, accept that. Now, I know that our values go from 8 to 420. So we're not going to need these 3 rows down here like that. All right, so we have our lower bound here. Now, in order to calculate midpoint, we have to have the upper class boundary. So, for the first class, 0 is the lower class boundary, but now we need the upper class boundary for that first class. So that is pretty easy to calculate. It's just going to be a width of 48. So we could start this with 48. But I think what I'm going to do, okay, let me go ahead and show you a little trick. So this first upper class boundary, we're going to use this value here. So we're just going to set that equal to that cell and hit enter. And now this cell is just going to be equal to the cell above it plus this one, which is our width. And we want to make sure that we put $signs in front of the column and in front of the row. And then we can hit enter, and then that should work. And then we can drag this formula down. It should auto-complete all the way down to there. And we can see that our last data value of 420 will fit in this last class. And the way that I had calculated this was to have 9 classes, and we've got 9 rows. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 classes. Okay, so our first class has a lower class boundary of 0, which is here, and an upper class boundary of 48, which will be there. The second class will have a lower class boundary of 48 and an upper class boundary of 96, so that'll be there. All right, so this looks like we've set that up correctly. Now, how do we get the midpoint between these two? Well, again, we can use our formulas. So the midpoint is found by summing these two and then dividing by 2. So we can put equals, and we're going to use parentheses to show that we want to sum everything in the numerator first. So I'm going to put left parentheses, this value plus this value, right parentheses, and then divided by 2. Okay, if this is not easy to read, then you can come up here to the formula bar and you can see the formula a little bit easier that I've typed out. So you can see that this is the lower class boundary plus the upper class boundary, and I put them in the parentheses to indicate to Microsoft Excel, I want to add these two first before I divide by 2. And if we hit equals, then it calculates the midpoint. So the midpoint between 0 and 48 is 24. And now to calculate the rest of the midpoints, I can just take this handle in the lower right-hand corner, and you'll notice the cursor changes from kind of like an inflated plus to a skinny plus, or just a reduced plus, and left click and drag that down, and it'll auto-complete that formula all the way down. So this gives us all of our midpoints. So we've made Microsoft Excel kind of do all the heavy lifting for us.